Hello and welcome to this new After Effects tutorial. Today I am going to show you how to create this nice handwriting animation. So today you will basically learn two different things in After Effects. The first thing is how to create this animation and how to animate a still image of this hand that it looks very organic and natural. And the second thing is that I'm going to show you how to make this normal font look like it has really been printed or written on paper. Like you can see in this example picture here, when I zoom in a bit, you can really see that the paper already soaked up the paint of the pencil. And if you take a close look over here, you can really see how the paint finds its way through the fibers of the paper. And this looks really organic and really realistic. So let's get started by building this whole animation from scratch. So we start by creating a new composition. In this case, let's make it 1280 by 720, as I am recording in 1280 by 720. Make it 25 frames a second and maybe about 16 seconds duration, and hit OK. Now I'm going to import all the footage that I need for this composition. So over here I have two different paper textures and also a still image that I took, my hand holding pen. So let's import those three files by selecting all of them and hit import. At first I select both of my paper textures and just drag them onto this new composition. Let's take a quick look at our paper textures. This is the first texture, and as you can see when I zoom out it is really big, so let's just shrink it S for scale and then just going down. Or you grab one of those corners, and if you hold down the shift key while dragging one of those points, it will always keep its right dimensions. And I really liked this paper texture because of the bottom part here and all those dots and spots that it has over here. But as you can see, we are missing the fiber over here. So some kind of lines that go through our paper where we later on want to place our small lines in our text font to make this look realistic. So I also had this second paper texture. So let's make this an even number, 32. Copy the scale by clicking on it, Control C for copy or edit, copy, click on the first paper, edit, paste. Now they both are shrink down to our comp size. And now I'm just changing the blending mode to something like overlay. And now you can see that I have this nice image of the paper, but also with the fiber of the paper. And now I can simply adjust the look of the paper by transforming the opacity of those layers. And I can do that by hitting T. Now I just bring it up to a point where I like it most. And about 80 looks quite nice for me. Okay, let's close this and pre-compose it. To pre-compose it, we select both of the layers, go to Layer, Pre-compose. It's all the way down here, but you can always select both of the layers, hit Control, Shift, and C, and there we have it. Just call this BG for background and hit OK. Now let's start by creating our text. And for that we just click on the text tool and type in I hard. And scale this up quite a lot. And the reason why I selected this text font, which is called Cookie Monster, is because first it already gives us the impression of a handwriting font, and the next point is that I have a heart when I'm pressing the O button, and this is exactly what I wanted. So to get the I heart that I had in my composition, I just scale up the I until it looks like a capital letter. And to bring them closer together, I can go over here and set the tracking for my characters. Maybe scale up the heart even more. Something like that. Now let's change the color. For the eye, we want to have it black. And for the heart, of course, we want to go for red. And with the mask tool, we can now just cut out the heart, that is the dot, on the eye. Go to the mask and invert it. There we have it. So while we're at it, let's quickly go into the background again, because I want to see those lines a bit better. So maybe we just go onto this first paper layer and apply a levels effect to it and give it more contrast. There we go. Maybe even change the opacity to something like 90. Okay, and that we don't get too much color, too much of those red tones in it. Just tint it and bring the amount of tint back. So you can see tinted, not tinted. Maybe 50 is fine for now. All of those settings I'm doing right now are really up to you. This is already a fine-tuning of my background. So, but now I close it and go back into my main composition. Now at first let's also pre-compose our letters by hitting Ctrl-Shift-C and call it letters and hit OK. And now we can start with the fun part, which is making the letters look like really written onto paper. For that, at first, we take a directional blur and we bring it onto the letters and animate the blur length. And depending on what paper texture you use, you may want to adjust the direction, but as my paper has this kind of vertical structure, I'm also setting this to 0. There we go. Now our letters are floating in a vertical way. But that, of course, doesn't really look realistic. So let's apply another effect called roughen edges to it. And by the way, you can either drag the effect directly onto the composition on your footage, or you drag it onto the timeline on your layer, or you just drag it directly onto your effect controls panel. But you have to be aware that your right layer is selected. Okay. And now we start playing with our roughen edges settings. At first we want to play with the stretch width or height parameter. Maybe you can't really see what it's doing, so let me bring down the scaling. Now when you take a close look, you can see that the lines are more or less horizontal. And when we now play with the stretch width or height, it changes this. So it's horizontal on positive values and becomes vertical on negative values. And as we have done this, we can now play with the scaling until you somehow mimic those lines of the paper. And now you can always play with the blur length settings to make this effect more or less obvious. Okay, and now I have to say that this still doesn't look really realistic. Because of that, we just duplicate our letters. This time we get rid of the directional blur and simply delete it. Next thing that we do is play with our opacity for those two layers. And we can also play with our blending modes. And something like the darker color looks really nice for me. And to make this effect even more convincing, let's try duplicating our background layer by selecting the background layer, hitting Ctrl D, bring it onto the top, and now we once again change the blending mode to something like multiply. Now you can see that this brings all those dark paper structures back onto our text. Maybe this is just a bit too much. We can always go down with the opacity. And for me, this looks really nice. You could always fine-tune it by going into your letter settings, maybe even duplicate your letter layer once again, play with your directional settings, maybe make this one a bit longer, offset it, and just go down with this transparency to add another layer of extra detail. So for now, let's go on with animating our hand. So let's bring in our hand picture and drag it onto this new composition icon. And there we have it. It is simply my hand holding a flow motion pen. And the reason why I took a picture and not filmed it is at first that I want to show you how to animate a still image, and this could also be a nice look for an animation. Second thing is that this kind of look is really popular in these days with animated still images. And the third thing is that I don't want to use a green screen for that. And also for the picture, I didn't want to use a green screen because then I have all the green spill from the green screen. And as I cut it out anyway, I don't have to take that much attention on what kind of background it is. So now you can show your skills in rotoscoping and start masking out this image. To do that, just have to go to your pen tool or hit G and start masking. Okay, I have skipped this a little bit because it took me about 1 or 2 minutes to roto out this hand. Now let's make some last small masks around this hole here. Of course, this one we will have to subtract our mask, so we go into our mask properties. You can always go to them by clicking on your layer and hit M twice, MM. And now we select subtract, it's down here. And the last mask for this part. And we also want to subtract this mask. Now we can select all of them, hit F for mask feather, and feather it a bit. Maybe this was too much. About 2 pixels looks fine for me. Okay, now we can close this layer. Back in our main comp, we can now bring in our hand 01 composition. Hit S for scaling and just bring it down to a size that we want. And just for the sake of it, let me shrink down the letters so that my hand has the right proportion and I don't have to scale the hand all the way up so that you can't see the hand animation anymore. Maybe shrink them down even more to 40%. Okay, and now we can start animating this thing. The first idea that I had was simply to keyframe all of this and go through this with many keyframes and then later on mask it out. But there is a quicker way of doing this. And this is why I wanted to make the tutorial to share this really cool tip. This is a feature that After Effects has built in since many versions, but not all of you may be aware of this. And this is a feature called Motion Sketch. You find it under Window, Motion Sketch. And here we have it. And with this, you can hit Start Capture and it captures your movement in real time. So this is really cool. And for that, let me at first prepare something, because all of this will be captured from the anchor point position. So I go to the pen behind tool and bring my anchor point to the top of the pen. So, and now I can go back to my normal selection tool and click on Start Capture. And when I click on that, it doesn't start capture immediately, but it starts when I start hitting down my mouse button, and it ends when I'm leaving the mouse button again. So let's do this. Start capture. And you can see now I could paint a heart, and that looked almost fine. But if you have a closer look over here on the motion sketch, you're also able to show the background while capturing. So let's go back, edit, undo motion sketch, go back to the first frame, hit the background button and do the same thing again. And this time I will also paint eye and the heart. Okay, here we go, and let's play this back. Really nice. And if we click on the hand now and hit U, you can see all the keyframes. For now, let's just select all of them, go to the first one, hold down the Alt key, and now select the last. With this setup, you're able to scale or upscale all the keyframes in the same way. This comes in really handy. So select all keyframes, go to the first one, hold down the Alt key, select the last one. I just want to speed up this animation. And maybe I also want my animation to start at this point, so I'm deleting all the keyframes before that point in time. Maybe also create a different keyframe out of the frame. And let's take a look at this. That's really nice. And this will also look nice when we turn on the motion blur for the hand layer. If you can't see the switch here, you have to click on toggle switches. There we have it. You also have to click it for the whole composition. And the last and hardest part of this is to mask out your text according to your writing animation. And I will show how I have done this for the first letter, and then I think you get the idea. And then we can go on with some final steps that I have done for my animation. First, I want to pre-compose all my letters. Call it letters comp and hit OK. And now I create mask around letter that I want to start with and go to subtract. Go to the point in time where my writing starts, which is about here, and set a keyframe for the mask path. Then I just go forward a few frames and double click on one of the mask points that I can animate it. In this case, I simply animate it downwards. And let's make a quick ramp preview out of this. I can also feather this mask a little bit to make it look more convincing. Really, really beautiful. And we're already at the end of this tutorial. So I'm just giving you a few quick tips that I used for making my composition look more convincing or more beautiful. The first thing that I did is that I have created one letter composition with some smaller parts that flow into the paper, or let's say shorter ones, by simply going into this directional blur and make one composition with a small blur length and another one with a larger blur length. And then back in my main composition, I had both of those layers and I animated the top version in with the transparency. In this case, it should look like the paint is really slowly soaking into the paper, which really helps selling this shot. The next thing is, because all of this are just still frames, I put an adjustment layer over it. Layer, new, adjustment layer, and added some grain on top. So add grain. And you can always change one of those presets or create your own one. Then you have to go to your final output and you have some real film grain on it. Maybe this is a bit too much. You can always decrease your effect by using the opacity of your adjustment layer. So let's go to 50%. And this would be a look which I would be after, but just to show it to you, let's bring it back up to 100% and make a quick ramp preview. And as you can see now, the film grain, which in this case really is a bit strong, just helps selling the feel that all of this was filmed and not just animated still. But you also have to keep in mind that the add grain effect really slows down everything. So I would also recommend you to add it just before rendering it out. And let me call this grain. There are two more things that I have done that I want to share with you. At first, I have applied another adjustment layer before the grain and added a tint effect to it. This just takes out all the color information and you can map it to different colors. But what I used to do is desaturate the image with it, and I can drive this desaturation via the mount to tint. So let's just bring this to 50%. And you can see what this is doing. It gives this more of a cinematic film look. And over that, I added, as always, a vignette. So I hit Ctrl Y to create a new layer, make this one black, hit OK, create an ellipse, invert the mask, feather it a lot, hit T once again and bring down the opacity. And also bring this beneath the grain. And in this case, this helps focusing on the middle of the image. I just now set the endpoint to the 4-second mark by hitting N for endpoint and B for beginning. So N is the end point. And now when I click on the timeline, I can choose, it's all the way in the bottom here, trim comp to work area. Now I just have to deal with this 4 seconds and I can show you this ramp review of what we have done today. This looks really, really nice. So now I just have to say thank you for watching this tutorial, and I really hope that you have learned something today about animating still images, and I really hope that you use the motion sketch effect, which has been in After Effects really a long time, more often, so that this effect gets more and more famous for all the After Effects artists out there. For now, I wish you a lot of fun in After Effects.